All right, so today what I want to cover with you is soft slab construction. We're going to make some cups, not unlike what you see here. They're very simple, very quick. They can be kind of fun and playful. They have a kind of a looseness to them that I really like. And the beauty of it is it doesn't take a whole lot of equipment or space or time to make them. So what will we need for these cups are a few things. We'll need some tape, we need a needle, a couple ribs perhaps, a wooden fettling knife, you're going to need a brush, we need a couple forms. These forms are going to ultimately dictate the shapes of the cups. We'll need some templates, there's that word again, templates, for consistency. So if we want to make a set, it's nice to have templates so that our slabs are all the same size, which makes our cups all the same size. We'll need some newspaper to act as a mold release. And then obviously we need some clay and some slurry. It's a good idea to have some water. And then it's really great if you can have a banding wheel. I don't expect you to have one of these at home, although you can find cake decorating wheels at local outlets and even, I'm told, at the 99-cent store. So anything that rotates like this is really helpful. You can get rotating hinges at Home Depot and make your own too. So here we go. Okay, so the first thing that we need to talk about are forms that would be appropriate for this drape forming method that we're going to use. And what I mean by that is you need to be able to wrap a piece of paper around the form and slide it off. Okay, so there are certain limitations in terms of what types of forms you could use. So if you can wrap a piece of paper around it and slide it off like so, it will work. If it were something like this, and you can imagine if I wrapped newspaper around this, I wouldn't be able to slide that off. Well, why does that matter? Because the clay won't come off either. I would have to slice the form, open it up, close it back up, and then score and seal it off, which really kind of defeats the purpose of having these rigid forms in the first place. Now, you could do it. It's certainly possible, but I think for right now, we want to keep things simple in terms of the forms and then go for complexity when it comes to perhaps textures or patterns or the way that your handles are formed, designed and or attached, right? So again, first thing you want to think about is what are the forms? What are the shape of your cups going to be? A simple cylinder will work just fine. They don't have to be cardboard tubes. This could be a soda can, anything, a soup can, anything that you think has nice proportions with respect to a coffee mug or a beer mug or whatever it is that you're planning to make. You must be able to, however, wrap newspaper around the form, tape the paper to itself, and slide it off. If you can do that, you're good. The next thing that we want to talk about are templates. So again, a template is an optional part of making these cups, but it's nice if you're planning to make a set, a matching set of cups. And what I mean by that is if I cut every piece of clay to match the template that I've cut that matches nicely to my form with about 1 inch to 1.5 inches of overlap, right? And that compensates for the thickness of the slab. So there's a little bit of overlap. That way, every one that I cut and form around this tube is going to be the same height. And again, that's nice if you're making a matching set. If you're not making a matching set, a template isn't all that necessary, although it's still nice to have so you can cut things really cleanly and so forth. Okay, and the template material can be made out of anything. This is just leftover Bristol board from our previous assignments. Okay, all right. Okay, other things that you might want are slab rolling shims and a rolling pin, although, as you know, those things are optional. They're not necessary for making slabs, but it does make it a little bit easier in terms of making slabs that are nice and even and thin, okay? So once we have our form wrapped with paper, we're ready to start making our slabs. I have a template here that matches my form, so I know how big my slab needs to be, and I'm gonna go ahead and again show you how I make a slab. And again, if you let the back end hit first, the momentum will stretch the slab nicely. I should be just about there. So let's check. Yeah, one more. That'll do it. Okay, and there's our slab. Now what I'm going to do, because I want to texture this slab by dropping it down onto something, is I'm not going to cut it to the template just yet. Again, the canvas texture is pretty lousy looking, so I will take a rib and I'll smooth that out. Okay, now as we've talked about, this is an opportunity to explore textures and patterns. And so I've got some things here that I like to use. I've used a lot in the past. This is just an old shake shingle. It's got a great texture to it. I'll just press my slab into that and pick up that texture, and you'll see it's really nice. Okay, so to ensure that I really get a lot of detail, rather than just pressing, I'm actually going to just kind of throw it down on there. You got to get it right, or you'll need to roll another slab, which in this case, I think I'm okay. All right, and a lot of times I will use them in a kind of a haphazard diagonal manner to give the texture and the patterns a little more movement, especially with this one. And now I'll cut it to match my template. Now you can see why I left a little bit of overlap, because my slab comes up a little bit shorter than my template because it's thicker. So I could just overlap it and join it, but I would rather have my slabs come together end to end. So I'm going to use a square, right? You don't need a square to do this. It can be anything that's somewhat rigid that has a 90-degree angle to it. If I take my right triangle and I set it on my banding wheel, and it runs parallel with my form from the bottom to the top, I can cut through both slabs at the same time, so they come together end to end rather than having that overlap. I'll remove the excess. Wrap it back around. And that's much better in my opinion. And so now I just need to join it. All right, so now we want to join the slab to itself. We're going to take a little bit of slurry. Open this up just a little bit. And I'm going to add slurry to both edges, and I want to try to achieve some level of particle alignment now. So I'm brushing it in one direction on both sides. And because these slabs are very soft and wet, I should be able to just join them together very carefully, just like so. Small amount of pressure, and then just wiggle them back and forth a little bit to further align those particles. And then I'll leave it alone. I'll come back and clean this up a little bit later. Right now it's so soft that anything that I do is going to have an effect on that texture that I've got there. So I probably want to leave it. Okay, so you can see we're already on our way to forming a cup. So now I want to make another lip for this form. Like I said earlier, I could leave this like this if I wanted to, but it's awfully sharp. So at minimum, I would soften it after I remove my mold. But I like to add a little more clay to the top, give it a nice little visual statement there too, which I also think is a little more functional at the same time. So we'll do that with a soft coil. And some of you might be wondering, why not just leave it like that? Well, that's an awfully thick lip on a cup to drink from, so it would be a little bit uncomfortable and probably wouldn't function as well as I would like it to. So I'll thin it down. But first I need to attach the bottom of the cylinder to the banding wheel. So to attach the cylinder to the banding wheel, if I use a little bit of water and my fettling knife and just press in and down very gently, that'll seal this off and it'll stick on there well enough for me to put pressure on the lip without the cylinder tumbling off the wheel. So I'll do that like this. Water running off the end. And just lay that in there, and I'm just pressing on it very gently. And now you can see that it's sealed back to the wheel, and it's fairly secure at this point. So now what I want to do is thin the lip, that coil that I added. I want to thin that down some and lay a little indentation in there. So I have a nice little spot for that cup to rest on my lip when I'm drinking from it. And now you can see why I needed to attach it to the wheel, because if I did this prior to that, it'd just tumble right off. And I'm just pressing in and down very gently and joining that coil. And now I'll use the softened rounded end of my fettling knife to further soften and indent right below the lip. And you can see now how that'll work really well when it comes to drinking from it. So now we need a handle. Okay. And there are many ways to make handles. I'm going to show you just a simple pulled handle for right now, and then we'll do a follow-up video on a bunch of other methods for forming handles. So if I have a conical piece of clay, it's a solid piece of clay, it's basically just a coil that has a little bit of a cone shape to it, and I get that wet, not up to my fingers, right, about an inch below, and my hand wet. And then I start pulling and rotating that clay. I can pull and stretch that handle into the shape and the length that I want. And the key is keep the hand and the clay wet and make sure with each pass that you draw your hand all the way past the end of the handle before you let go. Otherwise it'll get thin in the middle and it will tear. And voila, there's my handle. Now, it's really soft, so the best thing to do right now is to take that handle and just find a spot where you can let it dry. If I put a little water on the table and I press the clay down, it will hang right there and it will dry and it'll have a nice curve to it, right? And then when I'm ready to attach it, it'll be leather hard and easier to manage. I still have one more thing I need to do for my cup, and that's create a floor. It's a very simple process. There's a couple different ways to do it. We'll start with the easiest, and then we'll move on to something that's also easy, but a little bit more difficult. So I need a slab. I'm gonna go ahead and use my shims and my rolling pin. Now, to remove this form from the banding wheel, if you just undercut it with your needle, like so, it'll come free. Now, clean that off of there. I want that surface dry, otherwise my floor will stick to it. So I'm going to set that there. I'm going to put my cup back on top. And here's where, again, you're going to make some aesthetic judgments. I typically will cut it oversized and irregular, meaning not circular, and that's because I'm going to fold the lip up around the bottom and give it kind of a, again, funky handmade result that I happen to like. Doesn't mean you can't fit it to the inside so that you can't see the foot. Again, that's up to you, and I'll show you that in the next video. So now if I put a little slurry on here, like so. Take the metal rib and just gently force that up around the bottom. And I'll make several rotations. Like so. And then a lot of times I'll just come back and soften that with my sponge. So it's not clean per se, but it's softened, it's sealed, right? And then the thing I like about this particular foot is it makes a really great place for your glaze to stop. Okay, so on this cup, I'm gonna do a foot or a floor that's a little bit different than this one. Okay, on this one, I'm gonna make a floor that fits perfectly to the interior of the bottom, so it'll be flush and you won't see it at all. Okay, it's very simple. It's a couple more steps involved, but it's really easy to do. Okay, so to make that bottom, one that fits to the inside, I need some kind of a template so I can cut a circle that's exact match to the interior of that cup. Well, I have more than one of these that are exactly the same, so I can use it. So if you like this floor or this foot, you might want to make this part first before you make the cup. Otherwise, the cup might be in your way a little bit, depending on your form, right? So you can make it, set it aside, and then attach it after you get to this point. In this case, I'm going to do the exact opposite of that. I've made my cup, my handle, I've pulled, it's over there drying a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and create the floor now, and then put it in. Okay, so now I have the floor. I'm gonna put a sheet of newspaper down, otherwise it's gonna end up sticking to the banding wheel. I'm gonna add some slurry all the way around. I'm gonna go be a little bit generous with it. Again, the slurry is going to help fill any little gap that might be there, but also it's going to help that cylinder slide over the outer rim of the floor. Okay, so that's ready to go. Now what I need to do is move the cylinder and the newspaper out of the way just a bit, so that I have some of the bottom of the cup wall exposed, so that the two will fit together. And so if I throw some of my newspaper away, I can grab my form, there we go, and slide it out of the way. Just a tad, just enough to then move the newspaper out of the way, and I'll just use my needle for that. I will put some slurry on that interior edge, not a whole lot, just a little bit. Okay, and then I'll just very gently slip that down over my foot. Okay, and then with a fettling knife, if I just kind of gently press in, really gently, I get a little bit of compression there to hopefully join that well. Like so, and then I'll just come back and clean it up. Okay, easy peasy. So there's my handle. You can see that the clay has stiffened a little bit. I'm going to add some slurry. I would advise that you score it a little bit, although I'm not going to do that. I've done lots of mugs this way, hundreds of them, and it's very rare that the handle comes off because the clay is still pretty damp. So I'm going to set that on, swirl it into place. Add some slurry here. I'm going to press that down, fold it back over itself, press it down again, and then put a little pressure on it, and then check to make sure the handle is fairly straight. There's our cup. So now that my cup is done, I need to remove the cylinder. Clay shrinks as it dries, so I need to get this out of here as quickly as possible within reason, or I won't be able to, and it will shrink and crack around this form. So the best thing to do is just set it down somewhere, twist the cylinder so it comes loose, and remove it. And you'll notice the paper isn't coming out, and that's fine. Leave the paper there. You can remove the paper once the cup gets leather hard. If you try to do it now, it will move the wall of the cup and the cup will be forever warped. So the best thing to do is take that tube out and just leave it wherever you did that. So if that means taking it out after you set it on a shelf, on a rack, or wherever you're going to dry it, that's what you should do. At this point, it's hot today, the slab's drying pretty quick. I'm just going to move it to my cart. Okay, so now that the cup is leather hard, I'll go ahead and remove the newspaper from the interior. I can do that now without worrying about it warping. And you can see that it's still a nice round cup. There's some work to do on the interior in terms of cleaning up the lip and the seam running down the side and in the bottom. And it doesn't take very much work, especially if you catch it right at this stage. So, and then I need to clean up some of the excess slurry from the exterior and where I've joined it here. So first thing I'll do is just put a nice clean bevel on my foot. You could do this with your wooden fettling knife or your metal rib for that matter. I'll use my metal rib to smooth and clean up the bottom. Okay, I use just a tiny bit of water on a sponge, kind of wipe that down nicely, and then hit it with a silicone rib. That'll clean that up real well. That'll clean that up real well. Nice and clean, smooth. Okay. I can use the rounded end of my fettling knife to clean up the seam between the lip and the top of the cylinder. And then the same tool to clean up the seam between the two ends of the slab. It'll make it look better and it'll also make it stronger. And then the same tool to clean up the seam between the floor and the wall of the cup at the bottom. Okay, and then any excess slurry from the exterior can be handled now. if I draw that tool around just very lightly, like you see here, it'll clean it up, but it also compresses and aligns those particles there where that's joined. And it's amazing what that'll do to the strength of that joint. With respect to shrinkage and expansion and contraction in the firing and so forth. And it looks really clean that way too. And there you have it.